This is a one-off meeting in response to events. We are, after all, socialists and we respond to events. My name's Charlotte Ahmed. I'm from the SWP in Glasgow. And this is the session, Rail Strikes and the New Mood for Resistance. Now, we've got a number of speakers representing different aspects of that resistance. And we will have time for contributions, but I think we're going to be using the speaker slip system. If you don't know what that is, rather than me calling you, because I can barely see you anyway, if you want to speak in the discussion, make a contribution, ask a question, if you put your hand up and our team members will come round and you will fill in a slip, hand that slip back to them, and then that will come to me so I know who wants to speak. Although I have to tell you that might be limited time for speech, so keep it short and to the point. That would be great. Okay, so let's just start. Now, I'm delighted that our first speaker is actually an RMT striker. It's Edgar Mensah. Welcome, Edgar. And he is an RMT union representative from Deptford branch, London Bridge Station. Okay, Edgar.
Thank you. It's nice to see quite a few people here. As has been mentioned, I work at London Bridge Station. I'm a RMT union representative for the Deptford branch. And I've been asked to come and speak today. Rail strikes and the new mood for resistance. I don't really think there's been a new mood. I think it's just been reignited. I think it's always been there. But obviously, the cost of inflation, cost of living crisis, everything has basically snowballed to a point where people have had enough. And I think it's time now that people exercise their right to actually take industrial action. It's a legal right. You have a democratic right to it. And if you are working in any kind of sector that has a recognized union, you should definitely join it. But we as the RMT union have been balloted. There's over 40,000 members that have been balloted across Network Rail and 13 other train operating companies. And the overwhelming result came back that there was a 71% turnout, and over 89% of those voters voted for industrial action. What people don't know is that consistent conservative governments have made it much more difficult for unions and their members to actually take industrial action. There's loads of anti-trade union laws that basically put thresholds in place. So for a vote to be legal, there has to be a minimum amount of people that vote, and then there has to be a result of 40% either way of those people that take the vote. And also the vote has to be a postal vote. Any general election that's happened over the last however many years has never been primarily a postal vote. The Prime Minister has been elected with a lower turnout than the turnout that we had on our postal vote. And he's in Downing Street right now. So it's one of those ones where the governments have tried to just make it a bit more difficult for the normal worker to exercise their right. And really, that's the only right that they have, to withdraw their labor. So in the media, you've heard loads of spin. Apparently, the people that are in this dispute are earning £44,000 a year. If we were earning £44,000 a year, we wouldn't be striking. So, yeah. Well, the people in this dispute are earning between 25 and 30. My actual my actual salary for the year is £24,009. So the reason why we are striking is because they want to change the terms and conditions of our employment. They want to include Sunday as a mandatory working day. They want to increase the average working week from 35 to 40 hours, which will basically mean if they get their way, they will include Sunday and make the average working week 40 hours, which will mean you're essentially working 6 days a week, every single week. They also want to increase the minimum number of hours you work per day from 8 to 10. So there's a lot of things there that don't equate because they don't want to actually remunerate anyone for that. So they want us to work more and longer for no extra money, whilst the CEOs are earning figures £500,000, £600,000 a year when they're actually working maybe 2 days a week. So it gets to a point where you get annoyed seeing the people that you work for earning these amounts of money, and then they're saying they want you to work longer and work harder for not much more money. They want to strip jobs out. They want to cut on Network Rail. They want to cut 50% of maintenance staff, which will obviously mean that the railway is much more unsafe. They want to adopt a more digitalized way of searching for track faults and stuff like that, which will then mean that only the faults will be found at a later date, rather than you have maintenance workers actually walking along the tracks and actually fixing them as they find them. So yeah, we're fighting back, really. I think everyone's seen how our union has been led from the front by Mick Lynch. He's gone on every single media platform that would allow him to, and those people have tried their best to make him look silly or try to get one up on him, and he's literally just come back with the facts that everyone needs to hear, because the media themselves don't want to give you the facts, but they will tell you that we're earning £44,000 on average. It really annoys me when I see it in the media, to be honest. I'm going to be honest, it gets my goat, really. But yeah, I think it's got to a point where you have to fight back and you have to show your employer that you're not going to take the constant cuts and the constant attacks on your terms and conditions of your employment. I forgot to even mention they want to also attack the pension scheme and actually reduce the amount that they contribute to the pension and make the workers pay more into their pension. So these are all the things that we are fighting against. So at some point we have to take a stand, and that's what we did last week for 3 days. I mean, it did cause a bit of disruption, but we had to do what we felt was democratically right for us to do. The support has been great, and long may it continue. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Edgar, and solidarity for your strike and victory to the RMT. Okay. And of course, Edgar's going to be able to answer, hopefully, if there's any questions at the end. Okay, our next speaker is Jess Walsh. Jess is going to get a bit longer, 20 minutes. She works for the Socialist Workers' Party in the Workplace and Trade Union Department. Okay, Jess. Are you going
to... Okay, thanks very much, Edgar, and solidarity, of course, with your strike. Yeah, I think it's right to say we're saying a big thank you to Edgar and his comrades, because I think this meeting looks very different than it would have just a few weeks ago, right? In fact, the title when we were planning Marxism about a month ago of this meeting was called something like "Cost of Living Crisis: How do we get more strikes? How do we get more of a fight back?" You know, lamenting the fact we hadn't seen more strikes and more fight back, even, you know, during this time of like a drop in living standards for working class people. So the first thing to say, I think, is something big has shifted, and thank God it has, right? We're at a potential turning point, I think. Finally, after years of kind of inaction and timidity from workers and unions, you know, during the pandemic and in the 10 years preceding, in the austerity period, and even longer than that. Really, for the first time in a generation, we're seeing trade unions on the front foot, confident. You know, 3 days of solid national rail strikes. It's the first national rail strike since 1989, with RMT members leading very lively, very confident picket lines visited by other trade unionists and supporters, and really uplifting everyone around them. And, you know, why is this important? Like, why are strikes important? Because I think for the last 12 months and even longer, you know, we've been kind of watching with horror as like the disaster that is British politics and the Tories just kind of plays out. You know, the Tories engulfed in like scandal after scandal, enforcing more and more like racist measures, authoritarian measures, pushing down on working class people. And instead of working class people just watching this play out, they entered the national arena and said, we're not going to take this anymore. We're going to stand up and fight for our own interests. You know, not wait for someone else to act for them. They're going to fight for themselves. And, you know, by shutting down the railways for 3 days, you kind of reveal something that's often hidden in our society, right? It reveals how essential ordinary people are to the running of this system. Nothing turns without workers' say-so. Nothing runs without workers' say-so. It makes the whole system turn. So, you know, that's something that we don't normally see. And I think we kind of saw that kind of class war come out into the open, right? You know, with the Tories' full-throated attacks on the RMT, the media running like huge attacks on the RMT, and you have to say that they completely failed to turn public opinion against the rail strikers, because the attacks just weren't cutting through. Because I think what the rail strikes have given voice to is a mood of bitterness and discontentment that a lot of working class people are feeling, and it's really kind of leading the way. And people suddenly feeling they're not so powerless to just accept what's happening to them. You know, people looking to join their unions, people wanting to fight. That's obviously all very significant. So as long as the rail strikes, we also saw the TUC demonstration just 2 weeks ago now, with, you know, a quoted attendance of up to 100,000 people. This is the first demonstration of its kind in like 10 years, right? I mean, big delegations of trade unionists from across the country. I think we're seeing a new mood of confidence and recognizing that need to launch a generalized fight back. And I think, thank God, because, you know, we are actually experiencing a social emergency with the cost of living crisis. You know, inflation's running at 11.7% of RPI. That reflects, you know, energy prices almost double, you know, cost of gas almost doubling, cost of groceries and essentials shooting up. I know I'm not the only one who, when you go to pay for your weekly shop at Tesco's, just like kind of flinching in horror at how much it's costing. And this is a disaster for people in work. People are running out of money before the end of the month, but it's also pushing like the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society into increasingly desperate situations. And really what I think this reflects is just an attempt by the bosses and the Tories to force the cost of another crisis created by their system onto the shoulders of working class people. And this is at the same time, by the way, that we saw the wealthiest in British society see their wealth explode during the pandemic. You know, there's more billionaires than there's ever been in Britain. There's millionaires being created all the time. We're seeing this huge transfer of wealth upwards, and we're being asked to pay for it. And the rail strikes and this new mood of resistance, I think, are kind of saying we refuse to. And I think what we hope, right, is that the rail strikes are just the beginning battle of an ongoing battle over the cost of living crisis, right? That means that their outcome is very important, not just for the rail workers themselves, although of course it's very important that they win significant gains and push back what the rail bosses have planned, but really for the working class as a whole. This is a significant battle. If they win, they can boost others to think they can fight and they can win. So Ken Clarke, who's a former Tory chancellor, speaking to the Telegraph, said that the national rail strikes must not be allowed to succeed, right? Because if workers secure a large pay rise, other public sector staff will copy their tactics and walk out. And this is what we hope. This is what we hope is going to happen. You can really see this might be this is a waking nightmare for the Tories if the rail strikes win. But there are other battles coming, right? Likely coming. There's the tens of thousands of CWU members, postal and telecom workers are themselves gearing up for potential national strikes over pay, winning a statutory ballot in telecom last week. RMTs won another ballot in the London Underground as well, so there'll be more strikes, hopefully in the London Underground. And then, NEU members representing teachers are going for a indicative ballot in October. PCS representing civil service workers going for action from September. And the UCU, of course, going for the UCU going for continuation of their dispute in the autumn for another ballot. So really, yeah, it's a Tory nightmare for the rail strikes to just be the beginning of a wave of strikes for higher pay. And I think all of us in this room should look to make that a reality as much as we possibly can. Okay, so the media has been running these stories, right, that are supposed to scare us. This is the beginning of a summer of discontent and an autumn discontent. That, postal workers, except, telecom workers, rail workers, tube workers, junior doctors, NHS workers, and others potentially striking. This would be fantastic, right? But we have to say that this isn't guaranteed that this is going to happen. And I think that means that we have a job to do as socialists and activists and trade unionists to try as much as we can to make this a possibility, to make this a reality even. Because there are dangers, aren't there, that this new mood that we're seeing, this new momentum, can be lost or fizzle out, and that mood of defeat and passivity can return. Nothing is guaranteed that, the number of strikes will just continue to grow in an upwards trajectory as much as we would like that to happen. But we have to fight tooth and nail to make that a reality. Because I think what we've seen is working class people have been offered, right, a glimpse of their power. And I think we can see how the situation could be transformed quite quickly. The trade union movement could be revived and transform the situation. But if we're looking at things at the present moment, there haven't been more national strike dates called for the rail strikes. It's kind of up in the air. And while the TUC demonstration was very good, we don't see another national demo in the pipeline. And while there are these plans, ballots and other things happening in other unions, there are no concrete plans as of yet for more strike days amongst these group of workers. So I think we have to say there's a very real danger that the momentum and the huge public excitement that was generated by the rail strikes could be lost and fizzled away. So I'm hoping we can have a discussion about how we seize and shape this moment as socialists and trade unionists and push this struggle as much as we can. And look to this moment as an opportunity for us to break through that passivity. So what are the dangers that this slides away? How has the momentum been lost before? And what do we do as socialists and activists to keep it going? Because there's a lot at stake, right? not just further slides in the living standards of ordinary people, but this has a potential to shift the balance of forces and hit back at a deadly, corrupt, racist Tory government. Push back against austerity and potentially weaken and even pull down this Tory government if it was to keep going. So these new examples of resistance should be supported. Solidarity should be built with them. But we have to say that there is still a deep pessimism that exists in sections of the trade union movement that has existed for a long time and is still ongoing, especially in the leadership of some unions, in the bureaucracies, and of course feeding into and being fed back from by the Labour Party. And that has acted as a stop on the type of action that we've needed previously. These people, there are people who don't think it's possible that we can fight and we can win. And this plays a big role in the prevarication that we see. It can act as a stop to more strikes and more protests. So we have to be real about that. And I think that means it's not good enough to just cheerlead what's happening or cheerlead trade unions. We have to work within them to push for the maximum resistance and push against this pessimism that so often infects the leaderships of trade unions. Because you don't need to look too far back to find an example of this pessimism leading to setbacks and defeats. In fact, to talk about the UCU members working in universities has seen, and leading from the front really, inspiring strikes in universities up and down the country. But they've seen their dispute has been obstructed and undermined by the leadership of the UCU at various points. Because Joe Grady, the leadership, doesn't believe it's possible for the branches that were out to win, and it's driven by that pessimistic belief. This is apparently a left-wing leadership of this union, and it has worked to undermine the democratic wishes of its members at various points. And then, other examples, we've seen the fire and rehire in 2021 of the British gas workers, onto worse contracts in 2021. That was carried through despite, 43 days of strike action from British gas workers. And I think that they were really let down by the leadership of the GMB, who failed, which was the union involved in the strike. The British gas workers were GMB members who were out on strike. They failed to give a lead, I think, at various points during the strike, delaying action until 6 months after the attack had been announced, losing momentum, calling off action for negotiations on coldest and busiest weekends of the year when British gas was vulnerable, and then, this negotiation yielding a lousy contract that strikers that they were recommended to accept, and this was a demoralizing blow, leading to the 500 who refused to sign being driven out of the company. A really awful defeat for people who had put up such a heroic fight with so many strike days. And then, of course, more recently, we had the illegal and devastating sacking of 800 P&O workers just a couple of months ago. This generated national coverage, right? A huge public outrage, a brazen attack. Not just fire and rehire, but literally like fire, just by. But ultimately, this attack was carried through without the RMT union leaders mounting a serious opposition, such as, recommending that the workers stay on the ships like they were at the beginning, calling for the blockading of ports or calling for more solidarity action. The kind of action that would cause a crisis for the bosses and the Tories. They kind of shied away from any of that kind of action because they were worried about the challenging the law, despite the bosses of P&O admitting that they broke the law when they sacked those workers. So I go through these examples of these recent defeats and failures, not to depress us, but to kind of give us a full picture of where we are. And kind of having a look at what the role that is played at various points by trade union leaderships, including in the RMT, that remind us of this contradictory position that's occupied by trade union leaders and the role that they can and will play at various points to hold back struggle. Now, while Mick Lynch and the RMT leadership have been brilliant, really, around the rail strikes, going onto the TV, pushing things forward, arguing very strongly, very confidently that it's their right to strike, pushing back against media attacks. This is also the same person who gave no leadership during the P&O dispute, which led to a huge defeat. So you see the contradictions that are held within trade union leaders. And I think I'm saying all this not to attack Mick Lynch, I think he's been brilliant, but to say that we cannot rely on the leadership of unions to lead the struggle from the front. And we should definitely work within unions and work with trade union leaders when they're pushing things forward. But as I say, don't rely on them to kind of lead the struggle without pressure from below, pressure from ordinary workers, rank and file workers to push things forward, which I think just underlines as much as possible how we should, as socialists, be trying to develop within the unions that we're activists in, independent networks of ordinary workers, independent rank and file, organisation at the base of the union that can exert pressure on leadership when required, spaces where lay members can organise within the unions. Oh, thanks. Because there are a litany of examples of, in the recent, on the more distant past, where trade union leaders have, not always played the most helpful role during strikes and disputes, either pulling the brakes on things or, going for a compromise or a negotiated settlement, when more could have been fought for and more could have been won. And it's because they occupy this contradictory position, right, where they're under pressure constantly from the members, but they're also under pressure from those they're negotiating with, the bosses, and they seek to find this negotiated settlement. And this is even the best left-wing leaders of the trade unions. Thank you very much. They do this. So it's important, all I'm saying, it's important not to rely on them, although of course we work with them and we work in the unions to push things forward. Sharon Graham, who's the new General Secretary of Unite, has been brilliant change of pace, given a voice, I think, to those frustrated with how passive the trade union movement before was. She's taken a much more combative stance, and that makes a big difference that she's done that, right? It's opened up more room for action and more room for strikes, but it doesn't mean that we should rely on her or rely on Mick Lynch to push things forward, to charge, and to lead the charge against the Tories, because they will be driven to look for compromise at various stages. And that's not to mention the influence of the Labour Party and Labourism, which I don't have time to get into. They're historically very, very linked to the trade union leaders. And of course, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer, who is explicitly telling his MPs that they cannot support workers in struggle. This will have us, shame, I agree, big shame. Because for the Labour Party and Keir Starmer, but other Labour politicians as well, Parliament is always more important than the struggles of workers. So appearing a more serious or a capable government is always going to be more important. So he thinks attacking the strikes makes him look more serious and appeals to the right. And it can and will use its connections to pull the brakes on strikes at various points. So I'm saying all this not to try and bring the mood down, but to try and talk about the forces that try and stop and slow action are very real that we're dealing with, right? Despite these 3 massively successful days of strike action a week ago, this massive degree of support from the public and the rail workers themselves. No new dates have been set. There's been no national demonstration called by the TUC. We don't have concrete plans to kind of keep this momentum going as much as possible. And I think there's a variety of tactics that people are looking towards. Rail workers themselves, I think, are excited about other workers joining them on the picket line, either other rail workers in other unions like ASLEF and TSSA, or the other groups of workers that I spoke about before. But I think if the RMT wait for these workers to join them, it may be weeks or even months before more action is called. So there's a real danger of momentum being lost. And then there's the question of the settlement. Mick Lynch has signaled that 7% and no compulsory redundancies might be the demand that he would be willing to settle for. But with inflation running at nearly 12%, that would mean a nearly 5% pay cut, and compulsory redundancies leaves the door open for large numbers of voluntary redundancies. So I think what happens in this dispute matters, of course, because it sets the expectations for other groups of workers. So it isn't selfish or unreasonable to demand an inflation matching or above inflation pay rise, right? It is in line with it is in line with what should be expected, and it should be held onto to ensure that working class people are not the ones who are made to pay for this crisis again. And we're about to enter a period in the coming weeks and months where the government is going to announce the pay deals for millions of public sector workers, including NHS workers who've gotten a very raw treatment for the government in recent years. They're looking to hold down a pay rise to 3 or 4% for these workers, another slap in the face and a huge pay cut. So I think going for maximum action to hit back at their plans is very, very important. And I think really just to finish, in the minute or something I have left, I think just to finish, I think everyone here needs to be an agitator and organizer for more resistance. We need to build serious solidarity with the resistance that we see, but we're not just watching what's happening. We're not just cheering on the RMT, although we will cheer on the RMT. We want the resistance to spread to every workplace, right? Everyone is feeling the hurt right now in terms of the pay squeezes that we're feeling. If there's an upswing, we have to change what we do as socialists and activists. We have to be arguing the hardest for more strikes, more action, and to draw people towards us to more radical trade unionism and ultimately a more radical politics, to encourage more and more people to join the union, of course, but to become, activists and even socialists to kind of draw the conclusions about the system as a whole that continues to create these crises. and is forcing them on the backs of working class people. And I think that bringing politics into the trade union work is so important. I don't have much time, but I think it matters hugely that there are NEU banners, for instance, at Trans Pride this year, and hopefully more banners at Trans Pride next week. It matters a great deal that trade unionists, workers and educators take up the question of fighting for trans rights and against the trans backlash. It matters a great deal, for instance, that British trade unions have always been involved in defending abortion rights in the UK, and it's why we're not suffering the same attacks that our sisters and brothers in the US are facing. You know, it matters that PCS members and workers in the Home Office are pushing back the Tories' racist agenda by refusing to implement the Rwanda plan and trying to push back against that. All of that matters very much. So we're not just looking to fight back against the attacks on living standards that we face, but those political demands that matter very much to working class people. Because I think this cost of living crisis is just one part of a set of wider crises that we're experiencing, and workers' struggle is the tool that we need to use to hit back against it. So thanks.
Thanks, Jess. Our last speaker on the panel is Karen Reissmann, who's speaking in a personal capacity but is on the Unison NEC and is a health worker. And you might remember in lockdown, Karen led a demonstration about health workers' pay during lockdown and got arrested and got fined £10,000 by the police while Boris Johnson and their Tories were partying in Westminster. She did get some compensation, though, in the form of £6,000 back, but hey, we all cheered her on at the time. So Karen will speak for about 6 to 10 minutes, and can I remind you, if you want to get in the discussion after, you need to fill in a speaker's slip. Okay, Karen.
Cheers, thanks very much. I never actually paid a penny of my fine, thanks to the people who supported me here in the room and right across the country. So unlike Boris Johnson, I never paid it, and quite rightly so. But I do think I want to argue that we've put up with austerity for a long time, attacks on working class living standards, and for a long time we've argued that the response to that, the level of resistance, given the scale of attacks that they've made on working class people, has been nothing like what we've needed in order to resist it. So we've seen a steady decline in our wages, we've seen a steadily increase in the amount of work that they expect of us, we've seen attacks on our terms and conditions, and the response to that in the main has been muted from the organised working class. And I think there is a bit of a sniff of a change in that. And I think that's driven partly by the scale of the attack. So whilst it's been like this, I think with inflation and the workload, it's suddenly plummeted down a lot further, where 7 million people in Britain are skipping meals. This is not a minor attack on our living standards. This is a level of poverty in the 6th richest country in the world that I don't think a lot of us have experienced for a long time. And I think that combination, partly of the rich are getting richer and people can see the us and them, that I think was apparent during the pandemic, but partly because for the first time you feel like there's an example of a real alternative. I think when the RMT went on strike, you saw in Facebook groups, in WhatsApp groups, and on wards and in community teams in the NHS, we saw people saying, they're doing it, can we do it too? We're pissed off, can we get a pay rise like this too? Can we put off things too? And I think there is a difference, and you can see in some of the strike ballots that are taking place, not just in the RMT, that have been an incredible inspiration to show it's possible to have an alternative, but I think we've seen other people say, yes, we're going to have a go. So the fantastic results of the BT workers, of the postal workers, of some of the results that are taking place, and also the scale of big ballots that are taking place. Over the last year, we've seen an increase in small strikes. Unite have got 4 times the amount of small strikes they had. The GMB have got 7 times the amount, and there are little bits going on in other unions as well. But I do think the scale of it is massive, and that creates opportunities for us where for the first time we might be able to get a level of resistance that is somewhere near the scale of the attacks that are being made on us. And I think that's not something that we should just say, fantastic, thank God for that, but actually we can play a part in making sure, A, that there's more of that, and that we can sort of nurture some of the demand for resistance that I think exists because of the level of bitterness. But we also are in a better position then to be able to organise for the layer of activists on the left within those trade unions to be organised as a left and a rank and file on a big enough scale, because there's a big enough pool of activity for us to be able to seriously confront some of the bureaucrats who are doing well in some ways. Sharon Graham, you know, has been an inspiration in terms of the confidence that she's instilled in people. Even Christina McAnee, my trade union leader, has said we've got to be strike ready, we've got to fight, we can't stop this any longer. There is a shift in some of what they're saying, and that's good, but as Jess said, we can't guarantee it's going to stay that way, and we know we need to build a rank and file organisation of the left in the unions that can form an alternative organisation, and that's why it's about what can we do at the moment to nurture that. And I think we have to seize the moment. We have to bring the enthusiasm of the RMT into our workplaces, and we have to take our workplaces into the RMT and onto their picket lines and onto all the other picket lines in order to get people get a feel of the reality of it and make it more real. We sent emails around my union branch and said, I'm going to a picket line, would you like to come with me? These are when they are for the RMT. And we had bigger sort of numbers attending picket lines, not just of reps, but of members who were saying, yeah, I want to come. That is something that's important to me too. I want them to win, and I want them to know that they've got health workers' solidarity, particularly because the government tried to pose that contrast. And I think, you know, we had the biggest number of people that we've ever had on a delegation to a demonstration in London on June the 18th. And out of those people, we went back and said, now that you've done this, do you want to become a union rep? We had 3 people in 1 week have agreed to become a union rep, because I think people want to do something at the moment. They want to change the world because they don't see it getting better. They see it getting worse. They see no end to it. They no longer have any faith in Starmer. There are 500,000 people who joined the Labour Party during Corbyn. Most of those people have left, and they are looking, not that they've given up on politics and wanting a better world, but they don't know where to go. And in a way, there is an opportunity at the moment to move people into class action, into taking action in the workplace and being organised and shifting and making a real difference and becoming the part of the left. So just taking a collection, the RMT have got no strike pay whatsoever, taking a collection for them so that when they win, it's your win too because you've given to them. Just doing a solidarity card, sign the card and take it down the picket line, making people feel like this is a real alternative, this is something that's real, leads into a conversation. If they can strike, can we do too? You know, asking people to be involved and to organising. No, I mean, lots of people can be cynical about the calls that Christine McAnee made for we've got to become strike ready and get organised for a serious fight over pay. I say, while she's arguing that, we 100% want to be the best activists who are fighting to make that become a reality, fighting to make sure that health workers join the RMT, join the BT workers, join all the other people who are fighting for pay, so that the bosses no longer get away with making us pay for their crisis. And I think that those opportunities that exist are not something that we can just sit on. If you're not in a union, join a union. If you are in a union, go up a step and just do one bit more. And what you find is you will be on more favourable territory than we've been in for a long, long time. And we have to use that opportunity to try and rebuild some of the destruction that not fighting has done to our trade union movement.
Thanks very much, Karen. Now, I've got some slips to start off with. Speakers will have to use the microphone, so if you come to the front and up the stairs. I'm going to call Julian first from the Queen Margaret UCU. Queen Mary, what's the difference? Margaret Mary, I don't know.
Hi everyone, first massive solidarity to the RMT from UCU. What you've done is absolutely inspirational to all of us. And I don't want to divert too much from the incredible struggle that rail workers are fighting at the moment. But I just wanted to briefly talk about the struggle that is going on in this very campus right now. So as you know, nationally, the higher education sector, we, UCU as a union, are in dispute over unnecessary and drastic cuts to staff pensions this year, which could see staff lose between 35% and 40% of their retirement income on average. We're also in dispute over the continuing erosion of pay in the sector in a time of unprecedented inflation and a cost of living crisis, of course, that we're all going through. The scandal of wide gender, race and disability pay gaps, rampant job insecurity and casualisation, and soaring workloads. And our members don't want to disrupt our students' education, but they've given us no choice by the employers' tactics of just refusing to negotiate on any of these fundamental issues. And so as a result, the branch here voted with many others across the country for industrial action at the beginning of the year. And since that vote was taken here at Queen Mary, the dispute has actually turned into something even more fundamental to all of us here, which is the legal right to take industrial action itself. So our principal and his supine senior management team, instead of coming to the table, decided to threaten striking staff that they would be deducted 100% of their pay every day indefinitely until they rescheduled their missed teaching, which is something that was absolutely appalling and in many cases was actually impossible, trying to undermine our legal right to take industrial action. So we decided the only way to stand up to a union-busting bully was to stand up to them properly, and we called for and won a local ballot here at Queen Mary, winning in more industrial action to add to our existing national mandate. And so we took further strike days and started our local marking boycott at the most effective time to fight back, which was at odds with the national strategy at the time. But through the unity of our branch, and including support from many of our wonderful students, like Seb in the front row there, we've stopped those punitive deductions being enacted so far. And we are now pushing for material compensation for all of our staff, including improving the London weighting on pay, where QM pays its staff below other London employers, and a meaningful commitment for pensions and the other 4 fights that we are involved in. So it wouldn't surprise you that management here have not negotiated in good faith, and we're currently in our 8th week of continuous industrial action, currently with thousands of students missing their marks due to the marking boycott, and due to the intransigence of a principal whose sole aim is to crush the union. Management have ripped up the value of our students' degrees through scab marking, removing quality assurance, including trying to outsource marking to a dubious Australian education consultancy for millions of pounds. And they've threatened to shut down entire degree courses if members carry out their legal right to industrial action. The principal has caused untold chaos and reputational damage to this institution, rather than negotiate in good faith. But here's the thing, we're not going anywhere. If anything, but frankly, away from the sort of high-level discussion and so on, the things I've seen on a one-to-one basis in the middle of this action have been nothing short of heroic. And I think, if anything, overall, our resolve is stronger than before. And we realise we're in this fight for the whole sector and for the trade union movement and workers in general. So we've been raising a local strike fund like we've never had before. We've had big support in the press, and we're recruiting members locally, which again goes against the logic of having to wait to be strike ready. You actually recruit by taking action. So, finally, any support to us is very welcome, but of course in doing so, note that our fight here is all of our fights, because we must resist the power of sociopathic CEOs, vice-chancellors, and the fascist machinations of the corporate state in general, one of whom's central aims is to erode the rights of the trade union movement and workers, which we fought for and won. So we must fight back, join together across the trade union movements and all activists, and defend our rights and win for a working life which gives us all what we deserve. Thank you.
And just to say that when you're leaving at the end of the meeting, there will be buckets. Do people have cash? I don't know, but it's going to go to the Solidarity Fund for that particular strike that Julian's told us about. So please give generously if you can. Now, the next speaker is Daniel. Daniel, if you could make your way to the mic while I'm reading out this question. Daniel's in the RMT. This is a question from Alison. With the Tories on the ropes and class consciousness being raised by RMT actions, how serious is the risk the Tories will escalate the war in Ukraine and pull people to nationalism? So that's something for the panel maybe to think about later. After Daniel speaks, it will be Ed Baldwin from the CWU. Daniel, okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm a RMT striker, work for Network Rail in Birmingham. Yeah, so I just thank you. I just wanted to make a short and sweet point about why it's important to visit our picket lines. So it's not only the workers themselves don't feel isolated. It also it uplifts people's spirits. So like previous large-scale industrial actions have fallen down or been sold out through the lack of support or through feeling isolated. Just want to give a quick example about my picket line. So it's quite a small picket line. It's not like a big station or a signal box. It's just an engineering depot. So it was on the second day of the strike. Yeah, we learned that management were sort of sneaking around, taking a van straight to site, doing our job, undermining our strike. Yeah, so we were feeling a bit dejected. Then we had, I want to give a shout out to Brenda from Birmingham SWP branch. She came along, she sort of showed her support, and she had like a really direct way of talking about politics. That I find difficult sometimes, talking to the people I see every day. And, we were like wowed, we're not alone in this. We got support from a lot of people, and it really uplifted spirits on the day that we were on strike. Yeah, as I like to say, we're on strike, you can too. Now, going on strike is one of the only ways normal people can collectively improve their lives. And ultimately, it's the only way we're going to beat this cost of living crisis. Thank you.
Ed from CWU will be followed by Mark Abel from the UCU.
Comrades, very, very good afternoon to you. My name's Ed Baldwin. I am political officer from the CW Invicta branch. I'm also a workplace representative. Comrades, we, the communication workers, stand with you, the RMT, to everyone else that's going through industrial actions and their troubles and strifes. Because your fight is our fight. And why the rest of the nation stayed at home and held their manhood cheap during the pandemic, it was the doctors, it was the nurses, it was the carers, the shop workers, the teachers, the transport workers, and the postal services that kept this country running. Heroes during the pandemic, and zero when we've come out of it. And now these bosses, with their wealth and their power, are attacking unionised industry. Now, each union will have to stand up and fight because no government is coming to help you, be it red or blue. Each union will have to engage with its members directly because now we can see which side mainstream media is on. The lawyers, the CEOs, the employees, the employers have been inspired by what has happened at P&O. And the government has done absolutely nothing to stop this. So what do? I'll tell you what we can do, and I'm going to use the pub analogy. Imagine your workplace is the pub, okay? It's your favourite pub. You've been going to this pub for years. Your nan and granddad went to this pub. Your aunt, your uncle, your mum and dad, your brother, your sister, your neighbours all went to this pub. And then suddenly this bully turns up and starts picking on your neighbour, starts picking on your friend, your nan, your granddad. What are you going to do? You've got two choices. You either walk away or you smack them in the mouth. That's what you do to bullies. You stand up to the bullies. You don't let them off. And no, officer, and I know this has been recorded, I'm not endorsing violence at all whatsoever. I'm just strictly using that as an analogy. And plus the policing bill has seen play to that, as with the draconian trade union laws, which was imposed by Thatcher, which New Labour did absolutely nothing about it during the 13 years of power, making this green and pleasant land one of the most hardest places to actually take industrial action. So let me leave you with this, comrades. I'm going to say to you, okay, what Mitch Lynch couldn't say to Kay Burley in an awful display of journalism. If you cross a picket line, that is scab labour. You cross a picket line, it doesn't matter whether you are part of that union or not, you are a scab. It is simple as that. And I'll tell you something, strikes will come, strikes will go, okay, but we never, ever forget a scab. Peace, love, solidarity, comrades.
Thank you, Ed. So Mark from the UCU will be followed by Liz Wheatley.
Hi. Solidarity, of course, to RMT and everyone else who is preparing for action, and of course, my own colleagues and comrades from the UC branch here at this institution. I want to pick up on what Jess was talking about when she spoke about understanding the relationship between rank and file trade unionists and the leaders that we have of our trade unions. And Jess was slightly apologetic about bringing this up, but I think it's absolutely right that she did. And in a sense, it's more important now when we see a rising struggle to understand that relationship and to know how to organize in response to it. So a few people have mentioned, not least Julian, who spoke a few minutes ago, that in the UCU, in universities, we've been fighting for quite some time now. In the years preceding the pandemic, we took a serious strike action in defense of our wages and our pensions and against the marketization of the sector. In a sense, we're fighting the same things as the RMT and everybody else. They want to drive down the costs of employing us so they can maximize their profits. That's what they want to do everywhere, and it even applies in universities. So we took action before the pandemic. They shut down the campuses for a year during the pandemic, and as soon as we're back again at the beginning of this academic year, we're taking action again. And some of us actually took action during the pandemic when we couldn't even get on campus. So we've had serious action, and we're proud to be able to think, and I hope it's true, that we've played a role as a union in inspiring and providing an example for others to follow, like the RMT and so on. But everything isn't rosy, you see, because we have a leadership that just at the point that things are hotting up and the RMT are coming out and all these other unions are balloting and things are taking off, says, let's call it a day. You know, we've been doing this long enough, we haven't won, we're not strong enough. Let's pause and reflect and see if we can build our membership a bit stronger and come back at some point in the future. And that's a real problem, because what they also did was really engineer a situation where just at the point in this academic year when we are switching to a marking and assessment boycott, which is a powerful weapon, Julian described it, you withhold students' marks so that the universities can't award degrees, and that's what they are interested in doing first and foremost. They're not interested in teaching students, they just want to award degrees to students. It's quite a different thing. Just at that point, our leadership sowed all kinds of confusion and asked us the question several times over, do you really want to do this? Are you sure you really want to do this? And the thing disintegrated, and we end up taking local action rather than national action. And it all ended up in a bit of a mess. And then they said, and as for next year, we don't really want to start again, do we? Because we've had enough of this. And this is all disguised in fairly radical language, the language of Jane McAlevey and the strike school and all this sort of stuff. And so we have to know how to combat that, and we have to be organised to combat that. And we have an organisation in the UCU called UCU Left, in which SWP members work alongside other left-wingers, and we're able to organise. And I'm pleased to tell you that as a result of that work, we have managed to overturn the wishes of the General Secretary to delay until God knows when, till our next fight. And we managed to get, because we made a simple argument. Is this the time really to be standing down? Just at the moment when the RMT are out, the postal workers are coming out, our colleagues in schools are balloting in the autumn, our own colleagues in another campus union, Unison, are balloting this summer and want to be out. You want us crossing their picket lines this autumn? Is that what you want? And we managed to win that argument, and so I'm pleased to say that we will be balloting again in a couple of months' time with a view to coming out and joining, hopefully, this rising movement against the cost of living crisis, and long may it continue. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you, Mark. Liz will be followed by Sarah Ensor. If we keep to 3 minutes, comrades, we'll get everyone in who's handed a slip in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last couple of weeks have been quite different. They've really put a spring in our step, haven't they? Apart from I got COVID, so it's probably the most frustrating couple of weeks to not be able to leave your house of the last 2 years, really. And you think about why, because of course some things have stayed the same. You know, the Tory sleaze and corruption stayed the same, be it sex in the Foreign Office or the COVID contracts or Wine Time Fridays. You know, the very fact that the Cabinet Minister responsible for ethics was the one who took the karaoke machine to those parties, I think sums up just how callous the Tories are and what disregard they had for what was happening to our lives in the pandemic. And of course, their attempts to make us pay have stayed the same, haven't they, as well? I mean, in local government, where I work, our wages have gone down over 20% in the last decade. We have what we call in our branch pay-free Fridays, where we always talk to our members about how the minute you log on or the minute you turn up to your workplace on a Friday, you are effectively working for free that day because of the attacks that the bosses have had on us. And of course, the other thing that hasn't changed is that the money's still there. You know, is that last week or maybe the week before when Johnson said that they're ending the cap on bonuses in the city, I just thought it was obscene because the city bonuses are already back to the 2008 levels, you know, up at the highest for over a decade. You know, Richie Sunak has a pet spa in his California home. I've lost track of how many homes he's got, but a pet spa. And of course, you get the CEO of the Bank of England saying, think hard before you ask for a pay rise, who's on 575,000. And the reason I go through the things that have stayed the same is I think we have to remember those things, that the money is there, that the Tories will try and make us pay, and how callous they are. But I also think we then have to look at what has changed and about what we do about what's changed. Because I think as the cost of living crisis has kicked in, the thing that's changed, the big thing is that people think we can do something about it at long last. And we definitely saw that with the TUC demonstration. I mean, on the TUC demonstration, we worked it out from our branch. I mean, I felt it was bigger and livelier than I expected, but we had the biggest turnout of members on our branch on that demonstration than we've had since the huge anti-poll tax demonstration, however many years ago that was, you know, which is a really significant thing. And it was really easy to get people out as well for it. But the other thing, of course, is the RMT strikes. And one of the things we did, I'm on Unison's NEC as well, along with Karen, and Karen mentioned that our General Secretary said from conference you have to go back and be strike ready, and we took it really seriously in our branch. So one of the first things we did on the Monday morning was organise a message of support for the rail workers that we sent to every rep that we've got 50 reps in our branch, and we sent it to every rep and said to all of them, take it down to an RMT picket line and read it out. And actually, loads of them did. And they all came back and emailed back saying how well received it was. All the RMT members were saying, have you sent it to the headquarters? Because they'll want to see it and all the rest of it. But of course, they all came back as well with, you know, a bit of the RMT strike had rubbed off on them, feeling much more confident and started talking to their members at work. So we organised a members meeting on Thursday, and one of our reps came along and said, oh, we've got to be strike ready, but we've got to strike, because one of my members in my section came up to me and said, when's the general strike? Now, they weren't saying we needed one. They said, when is it? And this was actually in the IT section as well, which are not known for their militancy, I'm not going to lie. And things like that, I think, have made a real difference. So we're organising a meeting with a rail worker in our workplace and with a CWU member, because the fact they had 1,000 CWU gate meetings on the day the ballot started. But we're also, from our branch, trying to say that our region needs to do that and our union needs to do that, so that when we have a ballot on our pay, that on the day that the ballot starts, we have the equivalent of the CWU's 1,000 gate meetings, that we want a shop meeting, a section meeting in every single unison workplace. And I think the other thing that Jess just touched on as well was about being political in your workplace, about looking at how we can bring people together over everything. So next Saturday, we will be marching both on the Trans Pride demonstration in London with our branch banner. We'll be then going straight from that to the abortion rights protest that's taking place later. So we will be
Brilliant,
busy.
Liz.
But I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you, Liz. Great. Sarah from the PCS National Executive will be followed by Anouk Baines, and I'm going to tap the mic after 2 minutes. On you go.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Okay. Yeah, PCS members are, we work in the civil service and related government departments, and we are balloting in September. And many of us, we have to say, we are afraid of the coming winter. Our members are already struggling with the cost of food and energy price hikes, and the government has recently announced 91,000 job cuts. And what Liz said before reminded me that PCS worked out a few years ago that because of the fact that we haven't had a pay rise in 10 years and the various pay freezes we have had, most of our members don't actually get paid in effect until the middle of February. Those are the kind of job cuts, wage cuts we have experienced. But I think our government, our employer, this racist government, massively underestimates the anger at COVID amongst us, and also the shame and anger at the policies coming out of this racist government. Our colleagues in the Home Office have been refusing to cooperate with the pushbacks in the Channel. So this is our colleagues on the boats in the Channel refusing to push people back across the Channel and instead rescuing them. And now they're opposing the Rwanda plan as well. But if we are actually going to get rid of this racist government, we are going to have strikes. So we are getting organised, we're data cleansing, we're doing, for the ballot, we're doing all that stuff you need to do to make sure you don't get blocked by the anti-union laws. But these arguments and convincing people that we can win our ballot is a hell of a lot easier since we went to the RMT picket lines. And we've been inviting RMT strikers into our branches as well. And all of this is it feels much more tangible. It's raised our confidence as well. And I cannot thank RMT comrades enough for this. But when we say that they're striking for all of us, this is absolutely true. And big numbers of people working in government departments are pouring into the union, and that shows me that people want to fight. Solidarity.
Thanks, Sarah. So, Anouk, where's Anouk? Anouk Baines? No? Okay. Okay, and our last speaker after Anouk will be Mark Thomas.
Hi everybody, thanks for letting me stand here and be part of this movement. And I was interested in that aspect around the RMT and the 40% that the government wanted us to get that vote for. But my sort of question and query around this was, we all, I'm sure, would like to show solidarity towards yourselves and support the cause, but to have the maximum impact to do this, and support everybody within the unions to come together, how do we stop the agencies or contractors doing the work for us when we're striking? But yeah, that was my question.
Jess talked about Ken Clarke's fear, his nightmare. And what we have to understand is what's at stake. Because it's not just that the Tories fear a fight over the cost of living. What they fear is that the decades-long fight by Tory and Labour governments, actually,
to wrest back power on the shop floor to the bosses, which the shadow of which we've lived in for the last 20, 30 years, could be reversed. We got a taste, a glimpse of the potential to suddenly see not just the fight by the RMT, but how the whole working class movement could suddenly start to come to its feet again. Therefore, our tasks are, I think, as follows. Firstly, for all of you not in the RMT, for all of us, solidarity. And not just words. Getting down to picket lines if there are more strikes called, taking collections at your workplace, taking colleagues with your union banner down to those picket lines, inviting the RMT members you meet into your workplace. It's good for them, believe me, it's even better for you to have that discussion in your workplace. Jess raised, rightly, a debate about, we want to try to encourage colleagues and brothers and sisters in the RMT not to settle for any compromise, not to settle for a below-inflation pay rise, not to settle for voluntary redundancies, etc. But I'll tell you what, it's not a question of just lecturing from the sidelines. Why would anyone listen to that? If you demonstrate real solidarity, if you show you're in the same trench, you earn the right to have a dialogue, a discussion with people about the way forward, about lifting horizons, about what's possible. So the solidarity is linked to making those arguments about not accepting any half measures, any compromises, and so on. Otherwise, it just falls on deaf ears. Final point, yes, it's about the RMT, but I'll tell you what, it's a challenge to all of us to build that solidarity. But if you're in a workplace, if you're in a trade union, it's a huge challenge to us to try to think, how can we raise the arguments and organize more effectively to spread that action? I'll tell you what the biggest danger is. The biggest danger, especially for some of the most established trade unionists, is routinism. That we go at the same pace, with the same methods, same expectations of the past. All of that has to be challenged. We have to speed things up, we have to think afresh, we have to draw in new layers of workers with new ideas and new energy, because our task, very, very simple, is to take Ken Clarke's and the Tories' nightmare and turn it into a reality.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you to everyone who put slips in, and if you did put a slip in and didn't get taken, apologies, we've just run out of time. But I'm going to ask our panel to come in for a couple of minutes each to wind up what has been a fantastic rally so far. So, first up, Edgar, the RMT.
Yeah, just to sum up, really, Ash Sarkar went on GMB a couple months ago, and she said collective bargaining is the only way for normal workers to actually get the best for themselves and their fellow workers. And it frustrates me that in my workplace, and I'm sure maybe in your workplace as well, you have people that say, oh, well, I'm just grateful to have a job. I mean, I'm grateful to have a job too, but at the end of the month, sometimes bills need to get paid. And if I haven't got enough money, it creates a problem. There needs to be a situation where people have to have their voice heard. And like Ash said, collective bargaining is the only way that these people will listen. Without us, nothing runs. If we're not on the platforms dispatching the trains don't go anywhere. If the cleaners are not there to clean the trains, then the trains are dirty. If the drivers, when they get balloted, if the drivers don't turn up to drive the trains, there is no service, absolutely none. You have to listen to the workers. You can't keep trying to attack their terms and conditions whilst prior saying that they were key workers and telling people to go outside and clap for them. Clapping doesn't pay the bills at the end of the month, So I always encourage people, even if they say, oh, I'm just grateful to have a job, to think about what's happening. Their attacks are coming and they're coming strong. We need to fight back. And we don't want to take strike action. Industrial action is the last resort. Of course it is. When we go on strike, we don't get paid. Any day we don't turn up for work, we do not get paid. I think that needs to also be put out there as well. I think people just think that people just want to go on strike and that they get paid anyway. It's not the case. If you don't turn up for work, your employer will not pay you. So yeah, I am happy that there has been widespread support from all other unions and the general public as well. Mick Lynch has said if negotiations stall or keep stalling, that strike action will have to be a thing where we keep going, and we will keep going until we get what we deserve. And I encourage all other unions to also fight for what is right as well.
Thank you, Edgar, and thanks very much for giving time up on a Sunday. Hopefully the solidarity will be returned in buckets. Jess.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. I thought it was a massively useful discussion. Before I begin, I just want to say solidarity with Julian and Queen Mary UCU, really brutal attacks you're facing. Thanks very much for coming and sharing with us, and the students as well. Really good. We're behind you 100%, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to get the word out about what you're facing. So yeah, I thought it was a massively useful discussion. I want to thank everyone for being a part of it. I hope everyone's feeling galvanized and is going to go back and take the discussion into their workplaces like we've talked about. I just want to answer the question that was posed by Amy, I think it was, that was read out. The question of will the Tories, will Boris Johnson escalate the war in Ukraine in order to escape, the crisis that he's facing? I mean, the Tories have no shame in what they'll do to get themselves out of a crisis. We can see they're pushing, they're ramping up nationalism. They're also turning to the crudest and most disgusting form of scapegoating of refugees and attacks and racist attacks that we're seeing. The more trouble they get themselves into, the more brutal their plans are for their treatment of refugees. And I think that it just underlines what we've been talking about, the importance of combining trade union militancy with a high level of politics that refuses to compromise on questions of oppression or questions of racism, and the importance of building the workers' movement that can push the Tories into this crisis, but also, building a political trade unionism that is anti-racist, that can do things like the PCS are doing, saying, you're not going to implement this plan without our consent. That means driving anti-racist ideas into the working class. And I think that means we need a different type of political organization to achieve that. We don't want an organization like the Labour Party that wants to put a lid on the strikes, wait for a Labour government, or an organization that wants to compromise on questions of racism or compromise on questions of LGBT oppression or trans rights. We need an organization that is fighting for a different kind of world. That's trying to create political leaders within the working class that can take forward the struggles that we need on the cost of living crisis, but could also hit back on the Tories' racist agenda. And that's the kind of organization we try and be in the SWP, in the Socialist Workers' Party. The system is in complete crisis. There's never been a better time to be a socialist and a trade unionist, to take forward the struggle. So I just encourage you, if you're not already a member, please consider joining the SWP, not just joining it, but helping us build the struggle so we're stronger and can make a bigger impact in the fights to come.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Jess. And our final speaker will be Karen. And don't forget the collection buckets on your way out for our comrades in the Queen Mary dispute. Thanks, Karen.
I just want to repeat that times are changing. I went to 5 picket lines in 8 days, and it's a long time since I've done that. And I didn't go on my own, which often we've done before. We've gone as SWP members. There are lots of other people who wanted to offer solidarity too. There is something natural about people wanting to offer solidarity because they identify with other people who are fighting back. We have an opportunity to get people to see how to make that more real, to get them more involved, to get them more active, to get them more political, to get them to see that. And lots of questions about how do you deal with agency workers, which I haven't got time for, I've only got 2 minutes, will come up that we have to have answers to, and we have to debate and discuss so that we do look at what's the right way to do that and learn the lessons from history, listen to what's going on. And I think there are massive opportunities, and we have to think big of what's going on at the moment. There is a real opportunity to not just look at the odd little strike strike here and there, but there is a possible wave, and it's a wave that we can make bigger by having demands and having creative imagination. What you thought you could do 2 or 3 months ago, and that was impossible, is now possible, but you have to go and argue it and look at the opportunities. And I think that's the challenge that faces us, to not just watch it or go up and down and win and lose, but be part of trying to influence and change that. And in the process of it, to grow a bigger number of rank and file people who are involved in that activity, and out of that, a bigger number of people who are organised as part of a left, as part of a revolutionary left, but also a wider left, that can be people who can influence it. For when people at the top, who are at the moment doing the right thing, start doing the wrong thing, we have an ability to organise, to challenge that and to win people, so that we don't see some of the defeats that we've seen go down, but we can actually turn those into victories that can inspire people further. So it's about using that opportunity and grasping and looking at what you can do. And there are lots and lots of stuff, and Socialist Worker will be full of it, and what people have done. People have given examples. We have to go away and do that work.
Thanks, Karen. Solidarity to all the people involved in disputes, and let's build a network of fighters that can connect those struggles so that we make sure nobody's left alone. If anyone wants to join the Socialist Workers' Party, come along and have a word with us about that. Thanks for coming.